Our story starts off with a boy Nanoa in an elite school filled with students with quirks. He gives the Fire Lord his homework, who burns it before the Ice King comes and tells him to chill out. Nanoa reveals that he has no useful power like everyone else, while the teacher explains that they are training at the school to defeat the enemies of humanity as he suddenly announces a new student, Kyoya. The Fire Lord asks him about his quirk, but he refuses to tell him. As another transfer, Nana arrives and tells everyone her power is to read minds. She goes over to Nanoa to ask why he gets bullied. To his surprise, the Fire Lord comes over and calls him an enemy of humanity because he has no powers, but Nana reveals that the Fire Lord came over to ask her out and rejects him harder than your high school crush. She tells Nanoa that he's a nice person when the teacher interrupts her, but she unveils that the mentor is planning to pick a classroom rep, so everyone nominates themselves. The Fire Lord says the most powerful should be the class rep, so Nana puts forward Nanoa for the position, but he rejects her proposal. Kyoya says to have a 1v3 between the most popular and leaves, surely sentencing Nanoa to a dramatic finish. He recalls that he was always an outcast because his powers aren't plus ultra, even though he always seeked to keep everyone safe. Nana wishes him luck in the battle, but he tells her he won't be participating in the fight. She asks for a tour of the school, so they go to have lunch, where he asks how her powers work. Nana explains that she hears people's thoughts near her, and because of that she gets overwhelmed when in crowded places. They travel to a cliff where Nana tries to get Nanoa to use his quirk, but he says it's nothing special, then goes on to explain that keeping their powers hidden is important because enemies of humanity may have invaded their school. A strong gust suddenly pushes her off the cliff, but he saves her from testing fall damage. He thinks it may be the enemy and heads back to their dorm, where Nana encourages him to lead their class because he's best suited. Nanoa tells her she sounds like his father and says that he forced him to attend the school, then leaves being upset. He sits in bed reminiscing about times with his dad when he hears a knock and sees Nana, who returns the watch he left at lunch. The next day, the fight starts out against Hot and Cold. The Fire Lord begins to push his opponent back, but the Ice King clutches it for the win, so the Fire Lord, being hot-headed, limit breaks and unleashes the greatest sun upon his classmates. But Nanoa uses his special ability to disable his powers and saves everyone, so they make him the class rep. At the cliff, he speaks to Nana and reveals that his powers are to erase people's quirks, which surprises her. He tests if he can stop her from reading his mind, so she takes his hand and reveals that for the first time in her life she can't hear anything outside her own head. He realizes that she has been struggling with her ability as she decides to let the crazy out and leave him on a cliffhanger. She explains to him that she is talentless and has been using deduction to guess what he has been thinking all this time. He asks if she is an enemy of humanity, but she explains that Nanoa is the true enemy because he was destined to be the commander of them all, as he tests fall damage and begins breathing water. It's explained that years ago, enemies of humanity began appearing, but they were formed from people who wielded quirks, so the humans fought back against them and won the war. They decided to find peace by segregating the rest of the X-Men on islands to fight the enemies of humanity, but in reality they still fear the quirk holders and send in agents to make them a hashtag. The Fire Lord asks Nana about Nanoa's disappearance when the Ice King suddenly freezes the whole pond. To her surprise, he tells his teacher that he can easily defeat any enemy that appears, which instantly puts him at the top of her bucket list. She questions him about his power and deduces that he can't freeze people. The Fire Lord begins causing trouble, but he's instantly defeated by Shibusawa, where Nana is told that he's the strongest guy in school. So Nana goes over and joins him for lunch. She spills over water, but the cup instantly returns to its position. Then he tells her that his power is the world, but Nana presses him for more information, where he reveals that he can go back in time and alter any event he wishes. She realizes that with his ability he could undo all the progress she made, when Kyoya suddenly shows up and asks him to investigate Nanoa's disappearance. Nana says he's just taking a sick day, but he reveals that because his room is beside Nanao, he could tell that he never came home. He begins questioning Nana on what happened after she left with him, so she thinks fast and says that the enemy of humanity is already among their class, then back away from Kyoya and tells Shibusawa that she heard a strange voice in his head, so he takes the hint and leaves. Shibusawa decides that he will investigate Nanoa's living status with her. He goes to his dorm and goes back to see that Nanoa didn't return home, but he reveals that his time traveling drains stamina and the furthest he can go is 24 hours. He follows his path until he arrives at the cliff, where he goes back but was spotted by Nana and forced to return before he can see her, dismissing Nanao from life, so he apologizes for doubting her and returns back to their dorms. Later on, she suddenly knocks on his door and makes up a story that Nanoa was attacked by an enemy of humanity. She begins to cry and begs him to go back to save him, so he promises her to do his best, then travels back in time. It's revealed that he was standing on the frozen lake that used to be water yesterday, so when he went back he began to breathe water and his body is now hidden below the frozen pond. Kyoya sees something shining and goes for a dive. He arrives in class where Nana asks if he wants to get lunch, but he refuses and enters into a shed instead. She goes in after he leaves and sees that he left milk for a cat before chasing after him. He invites her to his room where they enter and play some old school games. He tells her that he would like to be her friend, but she asks why he's investigating Nanoa's disappearance. So he explains that he has a little sister that also went missing on the island, but no one is doing anything to find her. They begin to leave, but Kyoya suddenly pulls out Nanoa's watch and carries her to where he found it. He asks if she knows what happened to him, but Nana says she left him at the cliff. Kyoya wonders if it was an enemy of humanity who pushed him down, so she instantly agrees and asks about his quirk, but he says it's nothing special. They tell the teacher that Nanao has been sent to heaven by an enemy, so the teacher tells them he will contact the higher-ups and to keep the secret for now. Kyoya begins to get suspicious of Nana and the island altogether. He even questions if the enemies of humanity are real. He enters the shed but realizes that the cat is gone, then turn on the stove to get blown to oblivion while Nana watches. She goes over to investigate and sees Kyoya burnt to a crisp, but he begins moving to grab her leg and questions how she knows that he was inside the shed as he fully heals and reveals that his power makes him immortal. He asks her to read his mind to get what he's thinking, so she pretends to do it, and he walks away to tell his classmates that he was attacked, but no one believes him. One of the classmates realizes that Nana has been injured and shows off her head game to heal her, so she decides to eliminate her next. She meets with the healer after school as Kyoya stalks her and realizes that everyone she gets close to is missing. She goes back to her room and decides to make her move, but Kyoya is on point, so she decides to turn up the music and sneak outside to visit the healer. Kyoya hears a scream and rushes to the room while coming to the conclusion that Nana is most likely the imposter. He sees that she has been hurt, and it revealed that Nana inflicted damage on herself to pretend to be a victim of the enemies of humanity, so she can shield herself in sympathy so no one will suspect her. He questions her about what happened when she explains that she heard an enemy's voice say they were going to smoke the healer, so she ran out to protect her. He begins poking 1,000 holes in her story and theorizes that she may have hurt herself, but he cannot come up with her motive. Nana suddenly shouts that she thinks Nanoa is no longer among the living. She blames herself for allowing this all to happen when the healer votes to make Nana their leader because she saved her life and can read minds to spot enemies. She accepts the position and starts off by collecting information on everyone's quirks. Nana gets confronted by a classmate who reveals that he can see the future and show her a picture of him getting a necktie. He brings her for lunch and explains that his predictions are absolute, so they can't ever be changed. He asks why she wants to off him, but she denies it until he shows her a picture of her giving Nanoa a little push. She realizes he's trying to blackmail her, so she asks what he wants. He says that he wants her to be his girlfriend and makes Nana give him a back rub. She decides to off him, but he tells her that since his powers are absolute, he will not pass until that scene in the photo becomes reality. He forces her to spend the night and falls asleep. He begins to take pictures while he's dreaming, and she looks at their futures but keeps one for safekeeping. In the morning, he wakes up and makes her clean his room, but he realizes that one of his pictures is missing and finds one that shows Nana doing bondage. She begins acting like a victim and begs him to change the future, so he decides to go to where it all goes down tonight to see what will happen. She changes the time on his watch as he comes in and tells her that he will see her later. She waits for him in the shed but drops her needles as he comes in. She goes over and ties a rope around him, but he escapes and pins her to the floor, then reveals that he noticed she changed the time on his watch. He decides to try and pokes her, but he suddenly starts feeling weak as she tells him that she poked him first with her needle. He gets confused, so Nana reveals that she staged the photo he found, then shows that the real 5th photo is this scene where she is caught after sending him to heaven. Like the video. If you liked the video, subscribe for more, and thanks for watching. Stay swifty.